In this problem, we're asked to find an exact difference and an estimated difference, and it wants the exact answer first. Now, one of the things I want to go over before we go any further is the situation that happens with subtraction that does not happen with any other operation. In subtraction, we may need to borrow, and this is true when we are subtracting mixed numbers as when we subtract whole numbers. So here's an example of having to borrow. When I subtract, I start from my ones, I start from my right-hand side and go left. I cannot subtract 9 from 7, so I've got to borrow. I can't borrow from 0, but I can borrow from 50. So I'm going to borrow 1 from 50, and when I borrow 1 from 50, my 50 becomes 49, and I bring that 1 over here. So now I can subtract 9 from 17, which is 8, and then 9 from 9 is 0, and I bring down the 4. Now we can always check our answer by taking the number that we subtracted and adding it to our answer. 9 plus 8 is 17, carry the 1. 9 plus 1 is 10, carry the 1. And 507, we get the exact same number. And again, here's another example where we have to borrow. I can't subtract 8 from 1, so I borrow 1 from 2. And notice that the number that I borrow from reduces by 1. So 11 from 8 is 3. I can't subtract 9 from 1, so I borrow 1 from 6, and my 6 becomes a 5. Now I can borrow from now I can subtract 9 from 11, which is 2, and then 5 minus 1 is 4. And then if I were to add 198 back, I would get 621. So we're going to have to look at borrowing in some of our mixed number subtractions. Just wanted to review that whole process. Okay, so looking at my subtraction here, I am going to separate out my whole numbers from my fractions. I'm going to subtract my fractions and then I'll subtract my whole numbers. So I notice that my denominators are not the same, and the least common denominator for 25 and 5 is 25. So to get to 25 from 5, I just multiply by 1. So this fraction is going to stay the same. I'm just multiplying by 1. But this fraction, I've got to change the denominator to 25. To get to 25 from 5, I multiply by 5, and so I've got to multiply my numerator by 5 as well. So 5 over 25 is the same as 1/5. It's just expressed with a different numerator and denominator, so now I can subtract. Now, when I go to subtract 8 from 5, I notice that I can't. 5 is less than 8, so I need to borrow, and what I'm going to borrow from is the number that is to the left of 1/5, my whole number. I'm going to borrow 1 from 2. So here's what we've done so far. 2 and 1/5 is the same as 2 and 5 25ths. I'm going to borrow 1 from 2. So when I borrow 1, my 2 becomes a 1, and I put the 1 right here. So this is how I've borrowed my 1. Now, to subtract, this doesn't do very much good in this form. I've got to get my numerator larger than 8. So to do this, I'm going to change my mixed number, 1 and 5 25ths, to an improper fraction. 25 times 1 is 25, plus 5 is 30. So 2 and 1/5 is equal to 1 and 30 over 25. I've borrowed the 1 from 2 to make it 1 and 5 25ths, and so that I can subtract, I change this mixed number, which has the 1 that I borrowed from the 2, into an improper fraction. So now I have, this is just a mistake here, I have 1 and 30 25ths minus 1 and 8 25ths, and I can do that. I can subtract 8 from 30, and when I do that I get 22 over 5. So that's my fraction part. Now when I go back to my whole numbers, 1 minus 1 is 0. So my fraction part ends up being my final answer. Now I always want to make sure that I have no common factors between my numerator and my denominator, and I don't. That is my final simplified answer. So let's go ahead and put our answer in here. We've got 22 over 25. Okay, we'll check our answer. And that is correct. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to estimate each number by rounding to the nearest integer. So we do that by looking at our fraction part and determining whether that fraction is less than 1/2 or greater than and equal to 1/2. So 1/5 is less than 1/2. So my 2 is going to round as 2. It's just going to stay as 2. 8/25 is less than 1/2. So my 1 is going to stay the same. So these mixed numbers round to 2 minus 1. So my estimated number is 1. And I see that my answer makes sense according to my estimation. 22/25 is almost 1. It's only 3/25 away from being 1. So my answer makes sense.